Welcome. Oh, hello. Hey, Nico. Welcome to what's going to be a shorter stream today, and I thought we'd do something slightly different than normal. So, the last couple of days we've been working on helper scripts to actually build dev container, dev features, or templates. Today, one thing I noticed is doing all of that is I was missing a lot of the shortcuts that I normally have. So, for example, when I look at Git, I use git st instead of typing git status, and that was slowing me down and causing me to be disconnected from how I normally work. So I thought today we would step out just really briefly and work on Dotfiles. So Dotfiles is a feature that lots of remote environments support, and Daytona is one of them. So we're gonna start more or less from scratch. I've got a small one already up and running, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So let's jump straight into it. That's not what I was expecting. It's like Inception. So let's see, what am I doing here wrong? Oh, I know. I'm watching myself on the wrong screen. That'll do it. So now, much better. All right, let's talk about Dotfiles. So in Daytona, this is my Daytona. I've got a repository that I can put in here for my Dotfiles. And I just so happen to have, and this repository is public, so you're welcome to go look at it. I have a relatively brand new, easy, lightweight Dotfiles repo. So in here is everything we need to start. And basically all we need to start is a script. These can be called lots of things. I use Bootstrap, but there's documentation for it. Can be Bootstrap, it can be install, it can be install sh, it can be in scripts, or it can be in the main directory. There's lots of options. And the goal is not necessarily for you to have to take your and make a whole new dot file for the cloud environment. You can actually use your local one. My local one is so integrated with like my Mac developer workflow and WSL developer workflow that it would be a lot of work to make it support yet another environment. So to get started, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to start with a very clean and simple Dotfiles. So this Bootstrap is pretty straightforward. All it does is, and actually, this came from, I took this from Zach Holman. So Zach is an early GitHub person, worked a lot of places, and his Dotfiles are probably some of the most popular Dotfiles that are used. And I definitely encourage you to go check that out. I'll drop it in chat just so you can see that. But in here, he's got his script, which is this Bootstrap. And I made a couple little changes just to make it more standalone. Like I don't set up the git config like this. This is also targeting a Mac. You can use it outside of Mac, but this is the magic in my mind, is these lines. So let's go back and look at that and see what it's doing. So this is effectively a function that links a file. And so you give it a source and a destination. You tell it whether or not you want to do things like overwrite, back up that file, skip it. And that's it. It will link it. If you want it to overwrite it, it will. If you want it to be interactive, to say, oh, overwrite this one but not that one, it will. It's a super awesome function. What I do is, or what it, here's the power though, is it loops through your dot files and it finds anything with a symlink, and then it with a file extension of symlink, and then it symlinks it into the Dotfiles directory. So I find this to be super powerful. In my case, I don't want it to overwrite files. Each of the remote dev environments, there are certain files that they set that if those files exist, you might not want to overwrite them. And I'll show you an example in Daytona of something that you either need to take responsibility to own or you need to overwrite. I don't want to back anything up, and since this is running interactively, if you hit some error, just skip it and don't ask for anything. And then that's really all the script does. So if we go back and look at the other thing it does, is it does set a .files root. It doesn't export this root. That's actually probably something that we wanted to do, is to export that so that all shells underneath it will get it, because it helps to know where your .files are, especially for some of the things that we're going to do. Like we're going to make a bash library that does some nice things. But that's it. So if we go back and look at this to the .cloud, I am doing right now, I'm doing a little bit of git, and that's it. So I've got a git config that will include a path for this .local. I think this is a great way to do things. If this file exists, it's going to go ahead and pull it in. So you can have a standard git config, and then maybe you distribute, like Zach has a standard in his repo, and then if you want to overwrite it as a user and you don't want to, fork and maintain and rebase patches, you just don't check in your git config.local. You could put secrets in there, you can put whatever you want in there. It won't go into the repository, and you'll just drop it in. In this case, I'm going to use that where if there isn't a git config, it goes ahead and just links in my local, which is where I've got all of the things that I care about. And then in my local are all of those commands that I use on a daily basis, and I'm really used to, just typing B for branch, F for fetch everything, incoming to see what changes I haven't pulled yet, so to see if I want to rebase or do something like that. So these to me are really important, and so let's go ahead and see what this looks like for .cloud. So, or not .cloud, for Daytona. So I'm gonna go grab this repo, and I'm gonna go add it to Daytona and update that. So now that's set up, and if I go ahead and launch this in Daytona, then what we should see is that we're gonna launch it, and at the very end of that, we'll see the .files being installed. So, welcome everyone. If you're new, it's great to see you. Feel free to jot questions or comments in the chat. Happy to talk about whatever. So there it goes, right there. We went ahead and linked in the .files, so those are up and running. So what I should be able to do is I should be able to go to a new terminal, and I should be able to type git status. Oh, that didn't work. Let's check. Let's see what went wrong. So, I know what went wrong. So, this is one of those where Daytona automatically puts in a git config for you. They set up some username, but this is the part that you don't want to mess with. So this is how Daytona makes sure that you don't have to worry about credentials. It's you log into Daytona, you log into GitHub or GitLab with Daytona, and then Daytona manages your Git credentials for you, and it does it through this tool. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to blow this up, because it's going to be there. I put in a patch, or I put in a Jira request so that we can, at the top of this file, just put in the include local. But what we can do for what we can do for this is, if we find ourselves in Daytona, we can go ahead and basically have a Daytona git config. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go to Git, my Git repo. I'm going to copy the git config symlink file to git config Daytona. I'm going to go ahead and open that Daytona file, which has got this. I'm going to go take this credential out and put this down here. And so now we'll basically set up that for however we want. So if we're in Daytona, I want to go ahead and copy this over. If there is no git config and we're not in Daytona, I'm going to want to copy this over. And so now how can we make that happen? So this is where a helper script, and in which case I'm going to use this one. So this is a set of functions that determine what remote development environment you're in. So this one can test for git pod code spaces in Daytona. And so we're going to want to use this particular function is Daytona to alter the behavior. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the script, and I'm going to, at the top, I'm going to source. So we're in the Dotfiles root. So I'm going to source bash from Dotfiles root source bash cloud.bash. So now we're pulling in these functions, and I'm going to go down to install Dotfiles, and I'm going to say oh, interesting. This is, we're going to change spaces, using spaces, 2 spaces. We're going to say if is Daytona. So if we're in Daytona, then what we want to do is we're going to say overwrite true. We're going link file. The source is going to be Dotfiles root /git config dash or .Daytona. And where it's going is going to be home git config. And just to make sure, I'm going to put this below so that we basically set up the... We're going to set up this so that we want that behavior inside of the if Daytona check. And so we can now test this. So let's go ahead and test this. We're going to go ahead and run. So it removed it overwrote the git config from code anywhere or from Daytona's home directory and symlinked that across. So if we go to that git config, it included that. Let's see. Interesting. Let's check what happened. So it removed it, but then it linked it. Interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually do this second. So I always want this to happen. Try this again. So if we run this again, so now if we go check that out, okay, so something I'm doing isn't actually working. So I see it that it gets removed. So if we go to so it removes it. Oh, so we don't want... So I guess maybe then what we want is... skip false. So now we go to this. That looks it. All right, so we linked. Maybe not. Oh, it's a directory. This is surprising. Let's go see what this directory is. It linked the .files. Oh, wait. Is that a... yes, that's what I would expect. That was me messing up. .files root still going to say that's a false. Override true, backup false. And we're going to run this again. So that's what I wanted. That's correct. So now if we look at this, we get a local and a helper. Although that helper is definitely not what I want. But actually, because they're linked, that'll fix it. Perfect. So that's what we needed to get. So now if I do get status, I've modified, it works. I've modified that, and now I'm free to go about this and keep adding more pieces, which is pretty cool. So there is something I'd like to do that's been driving me a little bit nuts. I do work for a number of open source projects as myself, and I do work at Daytona, and I would like to be able to use various pieces for those projects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a new, not a new feature, but just a feature of git config. Called include if. And we're going to go see how this works. So we're going to find include if. If a remote within the given URL exists. This is what I want. So I only want to include this if. So we're going to take this and we're going to go back to git config Daytona. I'm going to put it in git config local because I don't want to keep messing with this. So at the top, we're going to put, and we're going to change that to github.com. We're going to change this to Metcalf C. Actually, I'm going to say anything in GitHub. Anything in GitHub. We're going to include interesting. I'm actually trying to think of this path is going to be a little bit problematic. Actually, what we're going to do is we're going to do docs. Path equals back here. We're going to say config dot Metcalf C or include if Daytona IO. Git config dash Daytona. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to FCC symlink. We're going to do the same thing for Daytona. So basically, if I want to do anything to Daytona, or to have git config specifically for Daytona, I can do that. So we're going to go in here. I'm actually going to grab a second. Don't mind me. I'm going off. Real quick while I look at my git config. So we're going to say chat at Daytona. There we go. And then we're going to go to matcapc. Put this in there. So that should give us what we want, which is that if the remote is basically anything in GitHub, so anything open source, I'm going to but that's going to be interesting. I wonder if there's a way to guard it so that you do one or the other. There's so much you can do in Git just through editing the config. It's wild. See, somebody else has done this. I'm sure somebody else has. So they do this, include if, get personal, but that's around, they do it on the directory, which is a little bit easier than what we're trying to do. Well, for now, you know what we're going to do? We're not going to get too worked up on it because primarily where I work is on my own stuff. So we're going to say if it's in Metcalf C, do that, or otherwise do that. And we're going to save this, and we're going to bootstrap this again. All right. So now we should be able to. Where'd that go? So from the include, we're going to do that. From get config, well, that's what we did. Those two things. So we included that path. Let's see. Let's just see what this remote is. Get remote show origin. All right, so I would expect that that would work. What is it? It's doing has config. What are we doing? Has config. So if we borrow this include f, and just compare it to what we're doing. That seems right. Let's go see what FC Daytona. Interesting. I wonder if you can't include inside of an include. Let's try. Let's just see. We'll take this out. We'll put this into Git. We'll put this into the original Daytona. I wonder if you can't include it in the include. Well, it found something. It said there's a bad line in get config. So now if we go into, that is this one, okay. So maybe this will help. It does not help. Oh, path equals. That'll do it. I'll do it every time. Interesting. So it doesn't actually render it. It just leaves it there. Let's see if we put this back in local, if it renders there now that we've fixed the errors in its... It doesn't. It only... you can't include in an include. Good to know. Did not know that. All right, we're going to pull this back out. And put this back into here. So now if we go back, we should see it again. There it is. Okay. So we've made some changes. So we're going to go ahead and commit these changes and see what it commits as. It should commit as commit it as me at Metcalf C. So if we now git commit, let's see what happens. Interesting. Doesn't work. It's not picking it up. Oh, it depends on how you clone it. I think I clone it from... Yeah, it's HTTPS. So lots of people want to do this, clearly, but they do it by where they check out mostly. Alright, well, right now, I might just have to spend some time figuring this out. And then next week I will come back and talk a little bit more about how this worked. But it's definitely one of the things that you get used to in a remote environment is that it's a little bit different. And now this is a nicety. I don't need this. I could actually another way to solve this would be to in the bash would be to actually have a command that would just let me toggle it and just say like git Chad, git Daytona, and it would just run those commands for me and swap out the names. That would be like the easy thing to do. I was interested in doing the clever thing, but sometimes the clever thing's hard. But we do have the basis of this working. I just need to figure out. My guess is there's something about this construct, this search here, that's not working. I wonder if I did this and just said like anything in GitHub, would that work? Let's try that. Nope. It's still doesn't know who the author is. Unable to detect address. So even if we do config show scope, my guess is it's still here. But it's not actually sourcing that. So if I cat config metcalf, that's there. Let's go ahead and add it. I don't think this is doing it, but just in case. And actually, it's right, we can pull this out. We can put this into local. I'm gonna leave it. Okay, it's just easier. It's just easier to leave it there. And overwrite it. It's fine. Let's try this again. Nope, still not working. All right. Well, we're going to wrap that up for today, but I will come back next week and we will see how this works. Thanks for joining. I will see you next Tuesday for another stream. Cheers.